Wonderful. So hi, everyone. My name is Aislinn Rowe. As mentioned in Kim's introduction, I work for Cooperation Canada, and I've been part of the anti-racism advisory group since it was convened first in July of 2020. So I'm here to introduce today's session and a little bit about what Cooperation Canada has done to get the anti-racism framework up and running, and then I will hand it over to others. But before I get started, I want to recognize that I'm joining you from the city of Ottawa, located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples, and hoping that this recognition serves both as a moment of respect to our First Nations on whose land we live and work, as well as a moment of reflective discomfort. We can take this moment to recognize, among other things, Canada's own record in perpetrating racist policies and practices towards Indigenous peoples, especially ahead of the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation next week, where we will be honoring the victims and survivors of residential schools. So as we talk about anti-racism and international cooperation, we recognize that Canadian efforts to do so must rest upon solid progress towards the acknowledgement of our own work to be done here at home. So today's session, we'll talk about the anti-racism framework developed by the international cooperation sector, some reflections on findings from the baseline data received by signatories, and explore how some organizations are tackling racism within their organizations. So for some background, Cooperation Canada convened an advisory group on anti-racism starting in summer of 2020. Since then, the advisory group has provided a platform to develop a collective approach to anti-racism in the sector. So this group, comprised of a diverse set of individuals from a diverse set of organizations in the sector, drafted the framework with a process for comments and advice and suggestions from the sector starting last fall, so about a year ago. And many of you were there to help us. So thank you for making the framework as strong as it was. We have convened as Cooperation Canada and as the advisory group many forums. We've relied on our formal and informal networks of specialists asking for advice, feedback from colleagues, friends, and allies, both in Canada and globally. So these collective conversations were sometimes uncomfortable as we examined our own personal privileges and the systemic problems in our sector, especially for people and organizations who act on behalf of Western countries like Canada. So throughout this collective effort and reflection, we since used that process to launch the final version of the framework in January of this year. And since then, we've had 71 organizations sign on. Those organizations were asked to do an analysis of their own progress and practices in their organizations. And then the task force, which is convened with some members of the advisory group and others, has coordinated and produced an annual report. Only one so far, but the goal is for this task force to produce annual reports based on this data every year. And then a working group will develop action plans and priorities for the sector based on this data. So the report has already been launched. It's available on Cooperation Canada's website. OCIC has put it in the documents for this session and this forum for this week. So if you haven't read it already, please do. And today we'll hear, instead of going over just the data, we'll hear a bit more from Task Force Co-Chair and World Vision staff Tiana Ridley-Padmore about the main findings, but also the next steps and what the baseline report is really telling us. Following Tiana, Odette McCarthy, who is an advisory group member and executive director of Equitas, will lead a discussion with representatives from signatory organizations and about their lessons learned for their organizational anti-racist change. So with that, I will pass it over to Tiana.